Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight for our evening of bird tales. My name is Julie Filiberti, and I am currently a board member of the Friends of Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge, which is bringing you this presentation tonight. So believe it or not, this is our 9th year of hosting bird tales, and tonight I want to give a shout out to our good friend, Dave Southwick, who I'm sure is out there in the audience somewhere watching. Um, he usually is. So this back in 2016 was his brainchild, and we've been hosting it every year since then. Um, because of its popularity, we've made sure that it's one of our regular February events. Throughout the years, it's kind of changed in format. We used to do live tales, gather people together in person, but COVID, like for everything else, it changed that. But we found that this online format is working for us because we have a much broader reach and we're able to bring in a lot more people throughout the state and actually throughout the country to listen to bird tales. So thank you for coming. We're glad you're here. If you have been a regular for bird tales, you know what you're in for. But if you're not, we're glad you decided to join us and check it out. So let me tell you a little bit about our Friends organization and the refuge. We were established, the Friends group, to give support to the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge. And for those of you who maybe haven't been to visit Missisquoi before, we encourage you to do so. The main parcel of the refuge is made up of a little over 6,500 acres of land and water at the end of the Missisquoi River, where it empties into Lake Champlain. And we're up in the northwest corner of Vermont in the town of Swanton. And it was established 80 years ago, a little over 80 years ago now, in 1943, to provide a protected resting and feeding area for migrating waterfowl. And in 2013, the refuge was designated as a wetland of international importance. It's also marked as an Audubon important bird area. The majority of our refuge is composed of wetlands and floodplain forest where the river empties into the lake. And it is actually the most expansive intact floodplain forest in the entire state of Vermont. The refuge also contains the largest bog in the entire Northeast, the 900-acre Mequon Bog. So in addition to these unique habitats, the refuge also contains some shrublands and maintains 250 acres of managed grasslands. The refuge is an essential resting and feeding stopover in both the spring and the fall for migrating ducks, geese, shorebirds, and other water birds. It's a haven for 17 state threatened or endangered species, including the spiny soft-shelled turtle, the black tern, and the recently listed eastern meadowlark. The refuge is open in every season from dawn until dusk for exploration, and there are trails to walk on. In this season, obviously, to snowshoe on or cross-country ski. We have rivers to paddle on. You probably wouldn't want to do that in the winter, but spring and summer and fall, it's beautiful. There's lots of wildlife to see. So if you haven't been there, or even if you have, we encourage you to come, take a day and come visit. So our Friends organization is proud to support this wonderful refuge in a variety of ways. And one of the ways we give our support is to bring public awareness to the refuge through providing fun and educational events like what we're here for tonight. That said, hosting events such as these is becoming increasingly more expensive. And continuing to make these events free for the public is really important to us. So we don't actively fundraise. All our revenue to support the refuge comes through either memberships or donations. So in virtual events like this, we can't put out our usual donation jar to solicit a few dollars. So if you're able to, you can ensure that these presentations continue and support the refuge by giving some financial support to the Friends through our website. And I think Rich will put that in the chat so you have that direct link. The most beneficial way to support us is to become a member of the Friends. So if you share our appreciation of the refuge and you want to support it, please consider joining our membership. It's easy to sign up on the website and choose whatever level of support best suits you. With your membership, you will automatically be subscribed to our quarterly newsletter, which will keep you up to date on everything that's happening up at Missisquoi. It's a win for us, and it's a win for you. On our website, if you don't want to join, we also have a donate button. And we would be so very appreciative if you drop by the page and hit that donate button. So with your generous contributions, we can continue to provide events like this and continue to support the refuge. So thank you in advance for your support if you go out there. So tonight we're excited to be partnering with the Green Mountain Audubon Society for this year's Bird Tales. The stories you're going to hear tonight will be coming from some of their leadership as well as members at large. Right now, I would like to introduce Jeff Hulstrong, their current president, who will tell you a little bit about their organization. Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks, Julie. Jeff Hulstrong, in addition to being a member of the Friends of Missisquoi, I'm the president of the Green Mountain Audubon Society, which was established in 1962 as an independent chapter of the National Audubon Society. And we have over 1,000 members in Chittenden, Franklin, and Grand Isle counties in Vermont. In 1964, the Green Mountain Audubon Society acquired the Nature Center located in Huntington. The original Nature Center, the house, the barn, and the 150-acre farm was a generous gift from Christine Hires. And then over the years, this legacy has grown to include 255 acres. Since the year 2000, the Nature Center has been managed by the National Audubon Society, our partner, through the statewide program many people know as Audubon Vermont. The Green Mountain Audubon Society itself sponsors a variety of field trips and programs throughout the year, and we also organize the winter bird count in the Burlington area. Our upcoming events are listed on our calendar of events page on our website. Welcome you to visit that and take part in our events. And we are so pleased to be partnering with the Friends of Missisquoi for this evening's program. Thanks for the invitation, Julie, and back to you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So one last piece before we get started with our stories tonight. The Friends would like to honor the Abenaki by acknowledging the refuge lands. The lands and waters of the Missisquoi National Wildlife Refuge are very special places to those who make it their home. And we, as the current stewards of this area, recognize our responsibilities in caring for these lands and waters. We recognize that these lands and waters are also important to the Abenaki Nation of Missisquoi, the previous caretakers of this land. We are grateful to them and their ancestors for caring for this land and its surrounding waters for thousands of years. We understand the importance of this land in the indigenous heritage of the region and to the Abenaki present and past. We recognize the hardships and suffering these families endured when they were pushed out of their traditional ancestral lands as European colonization took hold. And we acknowledge their agony and despair when their access to the Delta for subsistence was ended by the creation of this wildlife refuge. We invite our visitors to share in honoring this Abenaki home by engaging in mindfulness while enjoying the refuge lands and waters, and by holding the space with care and appreciation. So our lineup for stories will be coming from a total of 5, maybe 6 different storytellers. And some of our tales tonight will have an international flair, and some will be very personal and more close to home. So to begin with our first story, I'm going to pass it over to fellow Friends member, Ken Copenhaver, who is going to give us our first story for the evening. Go ahead, Ken.
Hey, good evening. I'm Ken Copenhaver. She just said, some of you might know me from the refuge doing monthly bird walks with Julie, but I am also a Green Mountain Audubon board member, so that's why I'm a speaker here tonight. And tonight, my bird tales are of the personal, local type. And all these tales have a common theme of being in the right place at the right time. And that's a very important skill for birders. And of course, I'm sort of kidding about that because being in the right place at the right time is partly luck, but there are things you can do to increase your chances of finding something interesting. Um, and interesting might not always be a rare species. It could be some of my stories tonight are more about interesting bird behavior rather than a rare species. So I want to start with some Christmas bird count stories. Some of you might be aware that some of the Christmas bird count circles have renamed themselves to Winter Bird Count and possibly some other names, but I'll stick with Christmas bird count tonight since that's most familiar to everyone. I've been doing Champlain Islands Christmas bird count for about 20 years. And my sector is the southern end of Alberg, including the Dunes State Park. And my first story is from 2 years ago, two Christmas bird counts ago, 2022. I was doing the count with Sarah Rosedale, and we were at Dunes State Park when she got a glimpse of a bird that disappeared into a bush. And she said she thought it was a female cardinal because it looked kind of reddish brown color. But we waited a minute for it to show itself, and it did fly to another bush. And during the flight, I thought, this doesn't look quite right for a cardinal. It's a little too big. The tail's a little too long. And so it landed. We got a short look at it, and Sarah and I both got our binoculars on it simultaneously. And we said in unison, brown thrasher. And so we really didn't believe that we saw a brown thrasher in December, but we were both sure of it, of the ID, and went back and looked at our circle's records. In 37 years, that was the first brown thrasher that we had seen. I also checked eBird reports on brown thrasher in northern Vermont, and that was the latest brown thrasher that had ever been reported on eBird. So that was a pretty neat find. Um, so um, so this comes again to being in the right place at the right time. If we'd been a minute earlier or later, we might not have seen it. But that was just the luck part. The other part was not assuming that it was a common bird and taking the time to check it out and be sure of what we actually saw. My second tale is also a Christmas bird count story. Um, and this was quite memorable. I've told this story to a lot of people now. I was birding with Eric Hines. Some of you might remember him. He moved away from Vermont quite a while ago, but he's a great birder. He's a professional birding guide now. It was early in the morning, and after we finished owling, we were there at 5:30 a.m. And did an hour and a half of owling. We went to the fishing access parking lot on the west shore of Alberg, and to our disappointment, the lake was covered with mist. We couldn't see the water at all. Ducks. This mist was probably 10 to 30 feet deep the whole way over to New York, and it was very eerie. And then the sun was coming up behind us because we were facing west. The sun was to our back, and we started seeing all these little white dots coming out of the mist, and more and more and more came. Um, Eric estimated that it was 10,000 snow geese, and I believe his estimate. He was pretty good at that stuff, and they came up out of the mist, headed south. It was just an amazing spectacle, something I'll remember forever. um, And of course, a lot of luck there. If we decided to start our daytime count in a different spot, we would have missed it. We might have gotten there after the mist burned off, or after the geese were already gone. But great place, great time again. But I have a third Christmas bird count story. This is um, I had to look this one up. It was in 2004. Again, as the Alberg sector, I was birding with Liz Alton, who was the head of the count at the time. We were on Summit Road checking out a feeder when we found a red-bellied woodpecker, to our surprise. Now, today, that's not so surprising, but in 2004, red-bellied woodpeckers were still pretty unusual in Vermont. And fact, we debated whether we needed a rare bird. Turned out that we didn't, but so that was pretty neat. It was my first Vermont red-bellied woodpecker. I'd seen them in other places, but first in Vermont. So that was a very neat bird and unexpected. But the thing about CBCs for me is that they're a chance to get out and do nothing but birding for the whole day, which I might not otherwise do in December or early January. And I typically start at 5:30 a.m. owling. And when I'm doing Owlberg, I start in Carol Yarnell's driveway, whether or not she's, even if she's in Florida at the time, which she has been the last few years. And over the years from her driveway, I've heard all four of the expected owls: silhouette, screech, barred, and great horn. So that's a pretty neat spot. And so there's a lot of luck in being in the right place at the right time. But the most important thing is to be there, and put in your time. You're not going to find interesting birds at home. Could be some at your feeder, but and then some of my stories here are about more about bird behavior than unusual species. Now this one is a really improbable story. It was late May in 2013. Again, I had to look that one up to refresh my memory. And I'm sure it wasn't raining when I left home, but when I got up to the refuge, it was starting to rain. I decided I'm not going to turn around and drive home. So I did my birding anyway. I started at Louis Landing parking lot and walked down Max Bend Road, so all the way to Max Bend. And what I found was, as I said, it was rainy and windy. The wind was coming from the south, blowing downstream on the river. The river flows north there, of course. And there were swallows everywhere. And they were flying. What they would do is fly into the wind, and they were barely making headway against the wind, almost just like floating stationary. And they would dart here and there, getting insects. And I guess they would eventually tire themselves out. And they'd turn around and just fly back down the river really fast with the wind and turn around and start all over again. And they did that for my entire walk from Louis Landing to Max Bend, about a mile each direction. And it was hundreds of swallows. My eBird report, I put down 100 tree swallows and 100 barn swallows, with the note that there could have been several times that many. There was really no way to count them. And this was really kind of crazy for May. I've seen a lot of swallows, like at Parker River National Wildlife Refuge, during migration. There by the hundreds, maybe thousands. But to see that many swallows in May in Vermont in one place was just absolutely amazing. So in that case, I was really glad I persisted and went birding in the wind and the rain, and I was pretty soaked by the time I was done. But it was kind of total luck that I decided to go out and bird in those conditions. But I stuck with it, and I saw something amazing. Another behavior type story is a quick story about one time my wife and I were coming back from somewhere, and we decided to take the scenic route down McQuam Shore Road. And we stopped at Swanton Town Beach. This was August. I was probably looking for shorebirds. Soon after we got there, an osprey came out, took a couple of dives into the water, and eventually caught a fish. And so that was pretty neat. But then the interesting part, a bald eagle came out from the north, up by First Creek, where they nest, and came out and started chasing the osprey. And the osprey put up a good fight, a lot of dodging and darting and feinting, and but the eagle persisted, and eventually the osprey either got tired or decided he wasn't going to win this battle. He dropped the fish, and the eagle immediately flew down, picked up the fish. So one of the interesting things about this is my wife, who isn't really a birder, she she still remembers this instance, and she'll always think of bald eagles as bullies, and she questions whether the bald eagle should be our national bird. So, um, so that was not only being in the right place at the right time, but taking the time to stop and look. We could have just taken the trip down, just continued driving down McQuam Shore Road instead of stopping, but we stopped. My next story, um, and this isn't entirely luck, but the lucky part was that I ran into a person at the refuge who was not a birder, and I have no idea why, but we started talking about whippoorwills. And he said, "Oh yeah, when I was a kid, there used to be whippoorwills at the Franklin County Airport." And I said, "Oh really?" And so I filed that away in my head. And the next May, I forget what month it was when I talked to this guy. The next May, this was in 2011. Um, I decided to go look for them. So I had done some whippoorwill surveys in Underhill and Cambridge a few times. And so I knew the protocol for finding a whippoorwill. It has to be a night that's um, uh, clear sky, or at least a visible moon, even if there's some clouds, at least a visible moon at times and not much wind, so you can hear them. And it should be in May or June, possibly even early July. So I went out to the airport and I followed the fence around to the north, and right on schedule, right at silver twilight, I heard a whippoorwill. It was the first whippoorwill I'd heard since I was a kid 45 years before in Pennsylvania, and obviously the first whippoorwill in Vermont that I had heard. So that was really amazing about this whole thing is this guy who wasn't particularly young, uh, he had probably heard them decades before he told me about it. So possibly these whippoorwills have been up there for decades and nobody had reported them. I had checked eBird and there hadn't been any reports. Um, so I've been going back every year, hear the whippoorwills every year. A lot of other birders have gone up there too. So that was a really neat find. And there's the luck of talking to a stranger and the luck of happening to talk about whippoorwills and then knowing the right conditions for going up and finding them. So that was pretty neat. And then another way to find good birds is by following the reports from other birders, either on Vermont Bird or eBird alerts. Um, and this comes under the heading of chasing. And for most people, chasing is a personal decision based on time, money, carbon footprint, and all that. I don't chase as much as I used to, but chasing can be very frustrating sometimes, like going 3 times to look for the fork-tailed flycatcher in Ferrisburg and not finding it. Or sometimes it can seem too easy, like the time I spotting the black-tailed gull at Charlottetown Beach before I even parked my car. I was flying back and forth right outside, right off the beach. Um, and sometimes it can take a lot of effort. Like many years ago, there was an American three-toed woodpecker reported at Moose Bog. And so I took the trip up there, 2 hours up to Moose Bog. When I got there, I found other birders, including Alan Strong and Ted Muir, who pointed me in the direction of the woodpecker. And so that was a life bird for me, and I've never seen one since. It's the only American three-toed woodpecker I've ever seen. And one of the really neat things was that I saw it on a tree next to another tree that had a black-backed woodpecker on it. They weren't quite in the same binocular field, but they were side by side. I got a great comparison. And also on that same trip, Alan Strong showed me my first Vermont oriole chickadee. So I'd seen him in the Adirondacks, but this was my first one in Vermont. So that was a very worthwhile trip, even though it was hours. But anyway, chasing is a very personal decision. And another quality for spotting rarities is just persistence, like finding that one Barrow's golden eye among 1,000 common golden eyes, or finding the cackling goose or white-fronted goose in the flock of Canada geese, or if we ever get redpolls that are feeders again, um, finding that one hoary redpoll mixed in with the common redpolls. But the thing here is to just look at every bird, pay attention to anything that looks a little bit different. It might be something unusual. But the most important thing is just to be out there and uh, putting luck on your side and for seeing something interesting. And that's what I have. Hope it didn't take too long. Our next speaker is Fernando Corrado, and I don't know what his topic is, so I'll let him explain that to you. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you, Julie, for inviting me to speak tonight. It's fun to start thinking back of my birding experience and trips that I have had in the past. So I'm going to speak basically about 3 different places that I birded. One was Puerto Rico, where I grew up. Then next will be Costa Rica and also in Ecuador. So let me share the screen because I have some pictures to show. Okay, so let's start let me start the timer here. In Puerto Rico, this is a story about a small bird. It's a hummingbird, and I have been enthralled by hummingbirds for a long time. This is the Antillean crested hummingbird. So this is the bird I'm speaking about. It's a little spunky green hummer with a spiky crest that is metallic blue, green blue. When the light hits it straight on, you can see the iridescence of this color. It's beautiful. I've been looking for this hummingbird in Puerto Rico for a long time and failed every time. I heard reports, people talking about it, but I couldn't find it. Then one day we made a trip to the island of Culebra, which is a small island next to Puerto Rico. There are 2 of them, Vieques and Culebra. And in Culebra, this bird has been seen frequently. So we went to the beach, and that was in the winter of 2012. And winter in this island of Culebra is very different than Vermont. Its temperatures are commonly in the mid-80s, so it's pretty warm. And we got off the boat, the ferry boat, to go to Laguna del Flamenco. And we walked, I walked the shoreline for a little bit, see what other birds went around. And after a few minutes, didn't see anything like this hummingbird. And I just decided to sit down and under the shade of a tree because it was quite warm. And I grabbed a drink and started looking around. And all of a sudden, I hear this whizzing sound going by. And I knew it was a hummingbird, but I wasn't sure this was the Antillean crested because the other common hummingbird in this place is this, the green-throated carib. And I didn't see it, I heard it, and I wasn't sure what it was. So I started looking for it, and then a few minutes later, it shows up right in front of me. It was just going to a flower lower in this tree limb, so I could see it pretty well. But it was so close that I had my camera behind me a few feet away, but I could not move because I knew if I moved, it will fly away. So I waited for a few minutes, and I was just observing this beautiful bird feeding on these flowers. And I was so happy to see it because I was trying so hard to find it. And I eventually got up, and then it flew away, and never saw it again. And this is in 2012. And since then, I've never seen this hummingbird again. So that was my only sighting for this Antillean crested hummingbird. Now I'm going to talk about a different bird. It's also from Puerto Rico. And is this. It's a Puerto Rican toady. The first time I saw this bird is when I was a kid. I went to visit my grandmother, and I was walking in the garden in the back and saw this little bird fly by, and I'd never seen this before. I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, and saw it. And after that, went inside and asked my grandmother if she knew, describe the bird. It was green, I had red, and she told me it was a medio peso. So in Spanish, medio peso is $50. And that's what the locals will call the toadies. He has a couple of other names. And it was just interesting. I went back into the garden to find it, and eventually did find it again. And I was able to get quite close and observe it, with my eyes, and see all the beautiful colors that it has. And I loved this bird since then. And later in my life, when I went to college, I studied biology. So we had some field trips, and we went to different places on the island and encountered the bird again. And by that time, I was very interested in nature and wildlife photography. So I had cameras with me, and this bird was a perfect target to photograph because it's so beautiful. There are 5 toadies in the Caribbean. There's one in Jamaica, one in Cuba, one in Puerto Rico, and 2 in Hispaniola. And in the, I think it was early 1800s, there were 2 Frenchmen that were brothers, and they were collecting birds in the Caribbean, and they captured, I think, all 5 species or 4 of them. And one brother was in the Caribbean, sent them to his brother in, I don't know if it was in France, and he cataloged them and he wrote names on them. And then when his older brother was doing the official reporting for this new species, the bird that was captured in Puerto Rico was mislabeled because they thought it was caught in Mexico. So when they put the name, they created the name Todus mexicanus. And but in reality, this bird was from Puerto Rico. And here's a movement has been for the last few years to try to correct the name, and it's changed it from Todus mexicanus to Todus puertoricensis. And it seems like this year or next year, that change may be official, but they're working on that. And so this bird is quite interesting. It's quite small. It's a little bit bigger, chunkier than the hummingbird. But one thing that I learned not that long ago is that they feed the nestlings 140 times a day. That's the most as any other bird species, as I was told. Can you imagine 140 times going back and forth, getting little insects to feed the nestlings, which they are usually in a hole, in a cavity on a wall, dirt near like riverbanks or in the woods too. Whenever there is dirt, they will dig a hole, and that's where they'll have the nest. When they fly, they make this, it's a very interesting sound, a whirring rattle. And that's how I learned to recognize them. When you hear that, or when they're called, it's a very simple chirping sound that it sounds like a buzzer. And nowadays, years later, when I go back to Puerto Rico and visit some of the forests, including near where I grew up, now I find them everywhere. But as a kid, I don't remember hearing them or seeing them that much. For some reason, now they're very more numerous in the island. Now, I'm going to switch to a different country. This is a trip I made to Costa Rica in 2016. It was late April, early May of 2016. This trip I made with my son, Alex. And this place called Rancho Naturalista in Turrialba, they have many feeders for hummingbirds, and they have probably over a dozen hanging on the balcony. And then they had a big row of local flowers that this hummingbirds and also other insects and butterflies come to feed from the nectar. And this is the list of the hummingbirds that I saw there just in a couple of days. I think it's 13 or so, and all these are just fantastic, beautiful hummingbirds. They have so many of them. I'm talking hundreds coming to the feeders that they had to change, clean them and refill them 2 or 3 times a day. That is just amazing. Now, one thing that happened the first night after we saw the hummingbirds, we went to dinner, and we're talking about all the birds that we saw during the day. And after eating, it was a fantastic meal. We went back to the room, and my son Alex went to take a shower, and I said, well, wait, I just do some reading and prepare for where we're going tomorrow. So he showered, and he said, you know, water is hot and pressure is good. Great place to shower. So good experience. So I gathered my stuff, went into the shower, opened the sliding door, and in the corner of my eye, I see this thing on the wall. It was a spider, and it was quite large by Vermont standards. I immediately jumped out, trying to figure out what I need to do. What should I do? So I decided to get a plastic bag, and get it out of there and release it outside from the balcony. We were in the second story. So I found a Ziploc bag, and I went back into the shower slowly and tried to move it. And it just started to do this movement like push-ups. I said, this is not good. And as soon as I started doing that, he jumped towards me, and he hit the plastic bag and fell on the ground, and I just almost destroyed the door getting out. So I waited a few seconds and said, well, see what I'm going to do now. Now it's on the floor. So I grabbed the bag again, and I grabbed a coat hanger, and I was trying to put the bag in front of the close to the spider. It was this time now on the ground by the drain. And I moved the bag closer. Finally, I was able to coax it, and it ran into the bag. I grabbed the bag with my hand, close it, seal it, and show it to my son. All this time, I think he was listening to music, or he didn't hear me. And show it to him, took some pictures. And then and here you can see, it's the last picture here. That was the friend. So I had it in the bag, took some pictures, and then took it outside and dumped it over into the garden. So the following morning, we are meeting for breakfast, and I talked to the guide, and I asked him, and I'm showing the picture. This spider was in the bathroom last night. You know what it is? So he kind of laughed and said, that is a Brazilian banana spider. And he said, you're lucky you were not bitten by it, because that will probably be a visit to the hospital, because it can cause a lot of pain and nausea, fever, blurred vision, convulsions, and low blood pressure. So it was, they couldn't believe that I captured the spider to release it. So survived that one. Now, going to the next place is in Ecuador. This is a trip that I made in November of 2018 with my son, Alex. And Galapagos is a place that I dreamed as a kid. I read The Voyage of the Beagle, Charles Darwin, and always said someday I'll go there. I'll visit the Galapagos. So finally I made that, was able to make this a reality in 2018. So we booked a trip to Ecuador, and we went from the Amazon in the east side of Ecuador to all the way far west to the Galapagos Islands. So we went to the first island is Santa Cruz, and they have a place where most people go called Puerto Ayora, and there is a Charles Darwin it says Charles Darwin Research Center. And that is a place where you can see a lot of the finches that Darwin was studying when he created the his theory of the evolution of a species. And also they have a lot of specimens of the giant tortoises. So being there and seeing these finches with my own eyes, it was just fantastic. I really had a great time spent at this place and the other islands that we visited, seeing many of the endemic species of Ecuador, including the Galapagos dove, the flycatcher, Galapagos mockingbird, penguin, Galapagos hawk, the petrel, Galapagos shearwater, and also another finch, the common cactus finch. In that trip, at the beginning of the trip in October, we went to the Amazon, so on the eastern side. Another place that I always wanted to go as a kid and was able to visit a place called Sunny Lodge, right in the middle of the Amazon. And this place is managed by a Quechua tribe from the Amazon. And all our guides there, this is the place where they grew up. So they knew this environment and the wildlife and the birds and plants, and just because that was their living depended on knowing everything around them. So there were excellent bird guides, and we saw a lot of fantastic birds when we were there. Let me give you an example, a few images. So I look at different families of these birds. Let's see here. So that was a crested owl, beautiful. That's gorgeous owl. We saw there in the Sunny Lodge. So with the great potu, the hoatzin, which takes you back, is you're thinking here like this a prehistoric bird from millions of years ago. Beautiful bird. Then we have this heron, which has a huge bill, a boat-bill heron. Here is a crested eagle, so very, very large eagle in the forest. One of the biggest kingfishers, the ringed kingfisher, was around the lodge. White-throated toucans, we all love toucans, so there's one of the species that they have. And I love woodpeckers, and look at the colors of this waved or scaled-breasted woodpecker. And then macaws. They have several species. This is one of the ones we saw, the blue and yellow macaw. And a manakin. There are many species of manakin in Central America and South America. This is a beautiful one with a wire-tailed manakin. And a cotinga. And there are, again, many species of cotinga, but this turquoise and red color is just beautiful, gorgeous. And one of the things that I noticed when I visited Costa Rica and Ecuador is the families of birds are so different than we have in North America, and that with the names. This is a yellow-browed tody flycatcher. So I noticed many of the species there is like you mash 2 different or 3 different species together, and here it is. This is what we got. So this is like a tody. It's very small, but it's a flycatcher, and very colorful ones. It was great to see this little bird. And there were many examples of very interesting named birds there. Here's a magpie. It's a tanager magpie. Beautiful magpie. Of course, he was mainly black. And that was it. So this concludes my presentation of experiences of birding. And like Ken said earlier, you got to, part of birding is luck, being at the right place and understanding a little bit about what you're looking for, the environment and the behavior that will make your chances of seeing those birds, finding them much higher. So thank you very much for listening. So I'm going to pass this to Lucy Lehman.
Thank you, Fernando. And thank you so much to Julie and the Friends for hosting this evening. I too am a proud member of the Friends of Missisquoi, so really glad to be with you tonight. I'm going to talk about my trip to India that I just went on in December, and it was to northern India. And with Rock Jumper Birding, which is a South African company. And I've traveled with them before, and they're just great. So this was, as I said, to northern India. I was particularly interested in owls. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm always up for owling at 5 o'clock in the morning or at 7 o'clock or whenever I can go and see owls. So this part of India has would have a possibility of 13 owl species. India has about 38 total owl species, but in this part, there were 13 that we might be able to see. And we got to see 7 of them, so I was pretty excited about that. You can see just from looking at this topographical map here, we went up into the Himalayan lowlands, and that's where we saw some of the most spectacular, just truly interesting owls. India is a great place to bird if you haven't been there. They have 1,377 recorded species there, so it's very much a worthwhile place to go and see. This was my first owl on the trip, and as it turned out, I would say at the end of the trip, it was still my favorite owl. This is the tawny fish owl. It's one of 4 fish owls. It's just absolutely a magnificent, magnificent bird. You can see that just beautiful sort of tawny, buffy color, huge ear tufts. It's a big bird. It's about 24 inches, stands about 24 inches. The females are bigger than the males, of course. The females weigh about 5.5 pounds. So it's a really, really big bird. We got to see this pair, actually, it was a pair of them. They've nested in the same sort of riverine stretch for the last 9 years, the local guide told us. And they have successfully fledged every year, at least 1 chick. What I love about the tawny fish owl, I mean, there's so many things that I love about them, but you can see that, well, I don't know, you can't really see the tarsi here, but they have 2/3 of their tarsi are feathered, and they're just really beautiful. They don't, like other fish owls, they don't want to get wet. So they glide along and they snatch the fish from the surface. What they will do is they will actually wade into the water and also hunt that way, which I think is just fascinating. So we saw this one up at about 1,200 feet, I think this was, that we saw this pair. And they were well known. They sat out there during the day. They were this was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can see its eyes are open. They were just in this sort of semi-somnolent state. We didn't get to see them hunting, but it was just absolutely such a spectacular, spectacular thing to get to see. So the next owls that we got to see were the brown wood owls. It's not a terrific shot. They were a little bit higher up. Again, it was a pair. Mating season for these owls in India is pretty much November, December, January. And we got to hear a lot of owls duetting, a lot of just wonderful displaying for the other mates. And so this pair, we saw them over 3 days when we were up in the Himalayan lowlands. And they're just beautiful owls as well, as you can see, really wonderful barring on the chest, great white bushy eyebrows with that just interesting grayish beak, beautiful, brown facial disc, obviously. It's also, it's a medium-sized bird. I mean, it's quite big, 34 to 45 centimeters. Again, the female is larger than the male. They're a nocturnal bird, as most owls are, as we know. They're a real woodland bird, obviously, as their name suggests. They're quite widespread. India, Sri Lanka, China, Taiwan, south to Java, and even Borneo. They love to eat, small mammals, the things that we would think that they would like to eat. They tend to have 2 eggs in their nest, and fairly reliably fledge both of them, from what we had heard. Again, this was a known pair of owls that we got to see over a couple of days. So this is a brown fish owl, which is also just a beautiful, beautiful bird. You can just see how huge this bird is. It's native from Turkey down to throughout Southeast Asia. Again, it's one of the 4 fish owls. Look at it. You don't see them here. It's got very, very prominent ear tufts, 19 to 24 inches high. Again, weighs pretty much up to, starts at about 2.5 pounds, goes up to about 5 pounds. The females are larger. The toes, as on the other fish owl, on the tawny fish owl, are very rough and are, of course, meant to be rough to catch the fish, and they help grasp the fish that way. That's their primary diet, is fish, frogs, crayfish, those kinds of things. Just, again, absolutely beautiful. Unlike the tawny fish owl, its tarsi are not feathered. They're bare, and they're just, but they have a brown claw, really just quite spectacular. And we got to then watch this one actually go and dive and fish and catch a fish, and that was really just such a thrilling thing. They're semi-diurnal, so they will actually get out during the day when they need to. They love to bathe in the shallows as well. They'll wade in and then just preen themselves nicely doing that. So again, that's breeding season for them. They'll breed and they will nest in an abandoned large stick nest, as some of the other large owls there will as well. They're found primarily in lowland forests and open but well-wooded country, and of course they want to be near the water. So this was the bird that a lot of people found, said was their favorite bird of the trip. And I would have to say that the tawny fish owl and the dusky eagle owl for me compete. This is a huge bird. This is the largest owl that we saw on the trip. It's 48 to 53 centimeters. It's interestingly one of the owls that is the least studied and about which the least amount of information is known. So there actually are no really reliable weights on these, but because they're so large, they know that the birds are often over 5 pounds, between 5 and close to 6 pounds is what they estimate for them. It's also not a completely nocturnal bird, but it will usually spend its day kind of in the seclusion in the canopy. And as you see, we saw this during the day. Again, it was just such a thrill, incredibly bright yellow eyes, and look at the claws on that bird. You know that you do not want to be messing with that owl. It was just truly such a thrill and an honor to get to see that bird. So those are the really big ones that we saw. We got to see a lot of really sweet, adorable, smaller owls as well, which I have a real weakness for too. Whereas many of the people on the trip were ready to, sort of kick back and have their cocktails in the evening and relax, I was always advocating for going out owling at night. And fortunately, the guides, including the wonderful guide, Stu Elsom, who took these pictures, because I'm not a photographer, he was always game to go. And so we tended to be able to rustle up, a couple of people to go. And this one we really had to look for. It's a hard bird to find. It's a tiny bird, as you can see. We spent quite a bit of time on several nights trying to find this bird, and we finally did. And the mountain scops owl, I think, is just a really sweet little bird. That said, it's actually quite a fierce little bird. It only weighs 4 ounces, which is just, amazing. So it's a tiny bird. It's yay high. It's less than 8 inches tall. So it's a very, very small bird. Has very short ear tufts. You can see kind of a little bit of its white eyebrows. It's an altitudinal migrant, as a number of the owls are. They don't go far, but they will go lower in elevation, in the winter. And he is one of the ones who does that, but he stays up quite high. And we saw this bird at about 6,000 feet that evening. It's got a really kind of interesting, you can see a rufous brown little disc. He's got very conspicuous bristles on him. And a bill that is sort of pale horn colored. This one sat very patiently when we put the light on it. It was there. It had been vocalizing. We had stopped. We had done some callback and started vocalizing. And then we were just lucky enough to get to see this one. And I think he was, to me, just one of the really, really sweet birds on this trip. This one was a real favorite. We saw this in Ranthambore National Park, so down much more at elevation. Actually, this is where we were looking for tigers, and we did get to see tigers, which was amazing. And this little cutie was just, we were going by, and actually I was the one who saw it out of the corner of my eye. Just said, "Oh, there was something there in that hole," and we backed up, and there it was, just this little sweet spotted owlet, also, a very tiny bird. As you can see, it's actually slightly, I think it's a centimeter or 2 smaller than the mountain that we just saw. So the spotted owlet is, you don't see it, but he has beautifully spotted wings, as you can see on the side, and he's got a nice white band. Tail has a beautiful kind of little narrow white bars on him. He too has feathered tarsi. Can't see them particularly well here, but he kind of fluffed and preened a bit for us, and you got to see them, which was, again, really, really special. So, and then finally, the Asian barred owlet, which is just a sweet little owl as well. We saw this, we saw many times, and we saw a lot of owls of these 7 species. We saw many of them multiple times. Just driving along, just sitting by, sort of in trees by the roadside. This one was there as well. White eyebrows that extend sort of, quite back to the eyes. He's got a bit of a mustachial streak on him, really lemon yellow eyes, really, really bright. And he's got a white patch on his throat, which you don't see particularly, in this photograph, but just as sweet as they come. It's generally a diurnal bird. So as I said, perched very much on branches kind of by the side of the road. It will hunt during the day. It actually vocalized when we saw it that day. It's got a real undulating flight pattern, as the owlets tend to have. Feeds mostly on sort of beetles, grasshoppers, that kind of thing. Interestingly, for such a small bird, it's one of the most aggressive of the owlets. It nests in barbet holes and woodpecker holes, and is known to kill both the barbets and the woodpeckers if it's, in pursuit of a good nesting hole. So never underestimate the fierceness of a good owlet. And I will stop there. It was just a joy to be on that trip, to get to see all of those owls, but it was also nice to come home and hear just the barred owls and the great horned owls here as they were duetting too. So anyway, thanks so much. I'm going to pass it off to Pat, my fellow board member, and I'll stop sharing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Lucy. Well, good evening. My name is Pat Phillips, and I'm also a board member on the Green Mountain Audubon Society and a member of the Friends of Missisquoi. And before I start, I just want to say these are 2 great organizations. If you're not a member, I'd really strongly encourage you to become a member because both of these organizations do some great things, and both are involved in efforts to educate the next generation of folks who are really going to carry on some of the work that needs to be done to ensure that we continue to look at these beautiful creatures. So thanks, I'm honored to be a guest here to speak at this edition of Bird Tales. And tonight I'm going to talk a little bit about a different aspect of birding, the sharing of our love of birds. Let's see if I get these going. I'm sure everybody here revels in the uniqueness and diversity of these creatures. Not only, this is a prothonotary, actually, that wouldn't leave me alone down in Florida. Not only do they exhibit a wide range of shapes and structure, but the diversity of colors and the patterns can just be breathtaking. Just gorgeous when you look at all these things. And this is what brings us to look at birds, how beautiful these creatures are. And every spring, the return of their sweet sounds and their songs make our own hearts sing with joy just to hear them come back again. And just think about this time of year, we don't hear that. And to hear these guys come back and hear it, it just is thrilling. And the capacity of these descendants of dinosaurs to migrate over hundreds or thousands of miles twice a year is extraordinary. So these birds just have tremendous endurance, tremendous navigation abilities, which is pretty amazing. How can one, after seeing, hearing, and learning about these wondrous creatures, not feel inspired to share them with others? Just extraordinary. Anybody see this book? It just came out recently by Christian Cooper of Central Park fame, and he really expresses it quite well. He says, birding shifts your perception, adding new layers of meaning and brokering connections between sounds and seasons across far-flung places, and between who we are as a people and a wild world that transcends and embraces. In my life, this has been a window to the wondrous. And that has inspired many of us to want to share this, whether it's through walks or outings, to share our enthusiasm and our love of these beautiful creatures. One of the things we know is that we inherently know that birding has the potential to build a sense of community and strengthen relationships. And you know when you go out birding with other folks, to share that joy with others who are either great birders or learning from other birders, it really builds strong relationships. Two of my best guys, Clem Nyland and Jeff Holstrom, who's going to speak right after me, just wonderful relationships with people. And when beyond that, many of you here, I'm sure, have experienced that friendship and camaraderie brought on by sharing these walks with other folks. And these are some of the walks that we've taken. Some of you may have seen Mark Labar out there sharing, and you can see the smiles on people's faces and their interest in this. Now, Leanda Haupt expresses it very well. She says, birds will give you a window if you allow them. They'll show you secrets from another world, fresh vision that, though it is avian, can accompany you home and alter your life. They'll do this for you even if you don't know their names, though such knowing is a thoughtful gesture. They'll do this if you watch them. And that's why we're out there. Well, tonight, I'm going to talk about a different aspect of birding. I want to talk about a special relationship that, for me, has grown stronger through the love of birds. And that relationship is with this person. This is my mom, Shirley Phillips, who will soon celebrate her 95th birthday. And as I share this, I'm stepping away from birds for a moment to give you some background on my mom and help you understand where she's coming from, because I think it'll give you a better idea of why I'm talking about this. My mom, first of all, is a certified New Yorker. Born and bred in New York. When we talk about country mouse and city mouse, my mom's a city mouse, okay? And her experience with nature hasn't been tremendously great. My mom was born just outside of Manhattan in 1929 at the start of the Depression. And she and her sister, born a year or so later, lost their mom to illness and were raised by her paternal grandparents during the Depression, who were then in their 50s. And my great-grandfather was a conductor on the Long Island Railroad. My great-grandmother conducted a number of different ways in making money to help make ends meet. They were financially tough times, but they took care of my mother and my aunt like they were their own children, and they had a wonderful life. Years went by, okay, and everybody gets older. My great-grandparents got older. My mom, here she is, she graduated from high school, and she entered the working world. And she was working on Park Avenue in New York City. She worked for a number of different businesses. And over the course of years, she met this skinny guy here on the right. It's my dad standing with his foot on his 1939 Pontiac convertible that had a rumble seat in the back. And pretty soon they were a couple. Well, as things go, my mom and dad got married, and very, very shortly thereafter, my dad was drafted and sent to Korea for about the next 18 months. Well, when he came home, they bought their first house outside the New York City suburbs. And within a couple of years, there were a couple of jokers walking around. If you look at the date on that picture, it's October 1958. They eventually gave birth to 5 children, but I had a sister who didn't survive that. But they gave us a wonderful life, as we grew up. As we got older, my dad thought it would be a wonderful idea to get his sons involved in the outdoors, roughing it, the great outdoors. Well, this was really kind of the antithesis of my mom's idea of fun, and more a source of anxiety over who would get hurt, bitten, or require rescuing from the waters of Lake George. This was not her favorite thing to do. My mom was actually glad to return to civilization and try to take these 4 characters, dressed even as they are here with their plaid jackets, and wrap them into shape. And she really wanted us to get involved and understand the ways of the city. And this is a long way from birds, but I'm going to come back. And she got us involved in professional modeling. We did television commercials. On the left here is my brother Joe, who was the Sunshine Cracker Boy. So we were in print ads and catalogs and TV commercials. But my mom, although she was intimidated by the wilds of the woods, she was more than up to the task of braving New York City traffic in the family station wagon to bring us all to auditions and to fittings. And she really inculcated a love of everything New York had to offer, everything the city had to offer in terms of food, culture, just experiences. But then something changed. My dad took a job in this place called Vermont. So we went from this to having cows next door. As teens, we loved it, and the adjustment was easy. But for Mom, she was like a fish out of water. Mom wasn't happy because nature and great outdoors really weren't her thing. Country living really didn't agree with City Mouse. Eventually, Mom moved away from Vermont, thrived working in the Boston area, another metropolis, and eventually retired. And then in the last few years, Mom, who was not a nature lover, came back to Vermont. And she came back to Vermont because she required more support, and she was close to my brother and myself. So for yet another time in her life, she had to adjust to a different way of life, living in a senior community, this one here in South Burlington, some of you may be familiar with. And it was not the easiest or really the most desirous thing for her. Upon visiting her at this place one day, I looked out the window and I looked down below, and there's a little wetland area out there. And I noticed a lot of birds down there. So as a birder, logically thinking, I got Mom a bird feeder. This is looking out her apartment window. And the birds continued to come. And with that bird feeder, lots and lots of birds. Well, I showed Mom the Merlin app, which she downloaded on her iPad. And soon I was regularly getting excited calls from my mom about the red cardinal, about chickadees, about goldfinches and many other birds. And these birds were doing their magic. My mom would be in her apartment. She wouldn't have the TV on. She wouldn't be reading. She'd be sitting there looking at these birds every day. And over the course of the time that my mom has lived there, and she saw these birds, she said, we observed 27 different species in the time that she's been here. And she's even had a Carolina wren fly in through an open window and sit on the windowsill for a while, visiting the apartment. And at 94, she's become pretty adept at the identification of many birds and often speaks of pleasure the pleasure that she gets from just sitting and watching them from her chair. And just last week, well, these are the birds that we've seen here. You can see there's a list, and none of them are really terribly surprising birds, but these are birds that Mom, just looking outside the window of her second floor apartment, has been able to see these beautiful birds. Last week, I just got a call from Mom, and she said, there's a big Cooper's hawk out in the tree right outside her window. And so I was close by, I came here and looked, and sure enough, Mom had used Merlin, and she identified correctly Cooper's hawk right outside the window. But I must share, there is one bird that she doesn't like here, okay? And it's this bird. My mom has dubbed this bird the bully bird, okay? Because this bird comes here and drives lots of other birds away. And so we had to change the kind of feeder so the bully bird wouldn't come back anymore. But anyway, my point with all of this is that birds fill us with wonder and joy, but they also help us become closer together through sharing our love of it. For my mom and I, it's done just that. While I'm grateful for the experience and the wonders of birds, I'm even more thankful to be able to have shared this with my mom. Share your passion and love for birds with a friend, a sibling, a parent, a child, or grandchild, and you too may find your relationship strengthened. And I know my mom and I definitely have had that. And so it's been a wonderful experience. And not only do I love birding, but I love the fact that it's been able to strengthen my relationship with my mom. And while I'm here, I want to share, can I get full screen and share with you? Slide over here. This is my mom, okay? And Mom agreed to come on the program here tonight as a surprise. And Mom, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what you like about looking at the birds?
I enjoy identifying the different type birds. I do have favorites. I love the black-capped chickadee. That's really my favorite. But I can't wait till the finches turn to gold again. Mm-hmm. That will be coming soon. But they are a joy to watch. I enjoy them.
Yeah. Why don't you tell about the one big bird that you had out here one day, not the Cooper's hawk?
Oh, the pileated woodpecker.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. He was about the size of the feeder. And I watched him. I called Patrick. I said, he's this huge bird. And I saw him fly from the feeder to the telephone pole. And they really are a joy just to keep track of what kind of birds are there.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about birds, Mom? About how it's affected you and I getting along?
Well, yeah, because I do call you a lot to describe a bird to you. I do have bird books, but I do call Patrick to verify what I found. And I sit there in the chair and I do fill my bird feeder even before I have my coffee in the morning, because I thought they have to eat first. Then I'll have my coffee.
So again, I would recommend share your birds with somebody you like, somebody you love. It's an important thing. And my mom's doing pretty well. She turns 95 next month. And I love you for it, Mom.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I love you too.
Okay. All right. Thanks, folks. We're all done.
Wow, that's a tough act to follow. Okay.
Sorry, Jeff.
Well, good evening, folks. My topic is the joys of urban birding, and in this case, in the Netherlands. And I've got a connection to the Netherlands through my beautiful wife, Eveline. She was born in the Netherlands and came to America at age 7 with her family for a 1-year stint, and they stayed for the rest of her father's life. And throughout her life, she's had visits to the Netherlands for cousins and aunts and uncles, and she's got a sister that lives there. So we've got a connection to the city of Haarlem. There's a part of New York City that's named after this place. It's in North Holland, pretty close to Amsterdam. It's about 4 times the size of Burlington. It's on a river called the Sparna and has canals throughout it. So there's a lot of water habitat within the city itself. And there's also a lot of green spaces both within the city and in the surrounding area. So lots of opportunities for birding. And the interesting thing about urban birding is that how close you can get to birds. They're habituated to people, and as long as you maintain a respectful distance, you can get pretty close. So this is the first bird here is the great crested grebe. This is a super common bird in the Netherlands. It's a striking bird, and it's found in the canals in the city. So the interesting thing about traveling, whether it's to Montana or to the Netherlands, is you see a bunch of locally common birds that are new to you, and it can be really exciting. Other birds that, seen in the canals in the city are the Egyptian goose, which the story that I heard was some of them escaped from captivity. This is an African bird, and there's now a breeding population. They end up nesting on rooftops and in trees, and it's a pretty big bird, and also has striking plumage. One of the if you were in Vermont and someone said that down at the Champlain Bridge a tufted duck had been seen, local birders would get super excited. And in Haarlem, it's the local duck. So tufted ducks are kind of garden variety birds in the Netherlands, whereas a ringneck duck, which we might see in Vermont, would be a super exciting thing for a Dutch person. The local cormorant is the great cormorant. So we get the double-crested cormorant in Lake Champlain, and a report of a great cormorant would be super exciting, and it's a very common bird, locally common bird in Haarlem. The Eurasian coot, very prolific bird, will beg for food from people, seen everywhere in every city that I've been to in the Netherlands. Its shire cousin is the Eurasian moorhen, also a water bird, but not as people-centric as the meerkoet. One of the more colorful birds is the common kingfisher. Maybe not as colorful as the one that Fernando showed, but a rather colorful bird compared to our beautiful belted kingfisher here in Vermont. It's called the ijsvogel in the Netherlands, and it breeds in the Netherlands and also all the way down into Africa. And then in urban birding, sometimes you see the birds that you left at home. So one of the first birds I saw was a mallard, and it was a little anticlimactic. Also, Canada geese are moving into Europe in greater numbers. Also, we see northern shoveler, northern pintail, green-winged teal, gadwall on the outskirts of town, and they have the beautifully plumaged Eurasian widgeon instead of the American widgeon locally. In the titmouse chickadee family, there are probably 5 species in the Netherlands, 2 that are found in kind of every town park. This being the koolmees, the larger, and then the bimpelmees, Eurasian blue tit, found in every park, quite gregarious. In the thrush family, so instead of the American robin, you would see this Eurasian blackbird. And there is sexual dimorphism, so the male is black and the female's brown. Another member of the thrush family with a beautiful song called the song thrush can be found in urban parks all over the place, either through their songs, so with your ears, or often with your eyes. A member of the pigeon family that can be found both in wooded areas and also in towns is the Eurasian wood pigeon. And then one of the more entertaining members of the community is the white wagtail, and it's named wagtail because it wags its tail to attract or to find prey. Very similar to either the water thrush or spotted sandpiper, and this bird is often found near water looking for prey. And one of my favorite local birds is the brown creeper. So there's a pair of species of creepers in the Netherlands, this being the more common one, the short-toed tree creeper, also seen in the middle of the city. And then probably 5 members of the corvid family locally, this being one of my favorites, beautiful long tail, beautiful plumage of the Eurasian magpie. And then also the beautifully plumaged Eurasian jay, a rather gregarious bird. There's also common raven, carrion crow, and a Eurasian jackdaw found all throughout the city. And then, of course, gulls are everywhere. If you were on Lake Champlain and saw this yellow-legged bird in the winter, you'd probably get excited. This is the lesser black-backed gull, but it's a very common bird in this part of Europe. The pink-legged greater black-backed gull would be an exciting find, but this is the local large gull. And then this is the smaller gull that's found locally in Haarlem. This is the black-headed gull, which would be exciting for us to see here in Vermont. And then there's a couple of exotic species that are found locally, probably some escapees or released birds. So the rosed ring parakeet is found throughout this city of Haarlem. The Netherlands is as far north as Newfoundland, but because of the jet stream and the warm ocean currents, it's quite a bit warmer than Newfoundland. So these parakeets are able to survive the winter in reasonable numbers. And, this is just a picture from the spring of courtship behavior right in the middle of the city. And the other striking exotic is the mandarin duck. This is a picture I took in a pond in the middle of the city of Haarlem. This duck was surrounded by mallards, and he was looking for something that wasn't there. So he was the only mandarin duck in the pond. And then some striking shorebirds also show up. As I mentioned, there's a lot of water in the Netherlands. So the avocet is found right outside the city. This is a wetland right at the city limits. And I'm going to close with the Dutch national bird, which is the black-tailed godwit, called the gutto in Dutch. It was voted probably by a bunch of bird nerds to be the national bird of the Netherlands. It's actually in decline. It's a threatened species, so there's a lot of habitat restoration going on to protect the Dutch national bird. Just a couple of side notes on urban birding. Walking around with binoculars in a city can creep people out, or for me, I do a lot of photography. I've got a 600mm zoom lens. Walking around and pointing it at people's houses is a no-no. So being judicious with the use of a camera is important. But for me, I live in Jericho, so a suburban, semi-rural area. Being able to go find a lot of interesting birds in an urban setting has been really rewarding for me. So I just wanted to share a few thoughts on urban birding, specifically in the Netherlands, with folks tonight. And that's what I have. Back to you, Julie.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you to Ken, and thank you to Fernando and Lucy and Pat and Jeff for all these wonderful stories. I hear my husband in the background giggling at some things and oohing and eyeing, and I had a smile on my face the whole time listening to everybody's stories. I hope our audience did too. That's the beauty of bird tales. Like, it's just there. You never know what you're going to get, and sometimes it's just really amazing. So I want to thank everybody. If you appreciated what you saw here tonight, check the chat box. We have the link to the Friends of Missisquoi and also Green Mountain Audubon. And I know both of those organizations would love to have your support and love birds. There's a lot out there to love. So thank you for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll see you again next year. Thanks.